Hello and welcome back. Now it's time to understand one more important topic, which is logging with one of the famous tool for Spring Boot developer, which happens to be Log4J. Logging is about getting the messages or information about your application which we have developed. We are going to start this from absolute scratch. However, I expect you should be comfortable with Spring Boot and you should have an idea how do we develop application with the Spring Boot. You should have an idea how we go through the layered approach development of the application. Then you will easily understand the implementation of logging with Log4J. Log4J happens to be one of the tool to implement logging concept, which talks about how do we get the information or messages of our application, what and all is happening in our application, the details I want to get, the updates of our application. Then that is the concept of logging, and that can be implemented with Log4J. Very often while you have working with the Spring Boot, while you have deployed the Spring Boot application or run the Spring Boot application, you might have seen something like this. Let me just run this application, right click, run as the Spring Boot or Java application. Of course, it is Eclipse, so you will see Java application, which is Spring Boot again. You might have seen something like this, a messages of our application, what is happening, information, warn, debug, all this information which you are getting about your Spring Boot application. This information is only called as logging. And now we need to understand how do we give this information, how do we facilitate this information about our application, which you have seen in core Java. If you wanted to print something on your console, you have used system.out.println. Through that, you have given the information about your application on your console. Now we are going to do the same using logging with Log4J tool, which happens to be one of the important tool, and as a Spring Boot developer, it is good to know about this tool. We will be starting from the scratch, but you should be comfortable with Spring Boot and layered approach development of the Spring Boot so that you can understand the implementation of Log4J easily. So let's get started into this series. Let's start with logging with Log4J. As a developer, in order to develop the application, you are going to use any of the IDE. It could be STS, it could be Eclipse, or it could be IntelliJ. And if you want to know whatever is happening in your application, every good thing and bad thing, you are going to use console. That means if you develop some logic, whether it is working or not, you are going to use one statement, system.out.println, and you are going to just check on the console whether your logic is working fine or not. Even otherwise, if there is any problem, if there is any error, runtime error or exception, that information also will be printed on the console. So basically, the messages, the information, details about what is happening in your application, every good thing and bad thing will be printed on the console, and we are using console in order to get the details of our application. As you can see, one example on your screen, one basic application I have developed here. Let me just run this application, right click, run as the Java application. I would like to run this application. And if you run, you can see here on your console, you are going to get the information here. Let me just rerun once again. If I run here, and you can see application started, and you're also getting the result 5. 10 by 2 is 5. That means whatever logic you have developed, is that logic correct or not? That information, that means every good and bad thing which is happening in your application, you can get the information, messages on the console here. Not just that, maybe I would like to give it as 0, 10 by 0, right? So if there is any exception, something has gone wrong, that information also you can use console and you can get the update. You can see here, there is an exception. Why this exception? What is the name of the exception? All the information, every good and bad thing about your application. But in the real time, the application will be big and you have no option to see these things on the console. Console is a limited space and you can keep only limited information there, and that too it is temporary. If the application is bigger and it is deployed in the real time in the sense, once you develop the application with so many classes, so many methods in it, you'll be compiling then you'll build that application and deploy it on the server. That means the application is in the production. Now at that time, if you want to know the status of your application, if you want to know the updates, every good and bad thing which is happening in your application, if you want to get that messages, if you want to get that information, that is when the concept of logging comes into picture. Let me just give you the pictorial representation what I am trying to say here. I would be writing one diagram here that will give you the idea about what I am talking here. As you can see pictorially, assume you're a developer, you have developed one application and that application is compiled, built and deployed using any of the tools. That means deployed means your application is currently in the production environment. That is a var file. The application has been deployed. Anyone can use your application. That time, if you want to know the status, what is happening, every good and bad thing which is there in the application, if there is any exception, if there is any error, if something is working fine, every information you want to get the update, you want to get the messages, you do not have access to console here. Of course, right now it is not in your local IDE. It is on the production. Your application has been compiled, built, tested and deployed. It is in some of the server and that means it is in the production. Suppose we have a client here, any of the client, assume that we have a client and our client is using this application. They will make some request to our application and they will be getting some response from our application which we have developed. And now when they make the request, what and all is happening, every good and bad thing which is happening, that update I want to maintain. That means the messages, what and all messages, if there is any error, if there is any exception, it could be any success message. That means every good and bad thing you can maintain, and having this update or information about your application when it is on the production, this is only called as logging. That means whatever good or bad you are maintaining in a separate file, it could be anything. We will talk on that, where and all you can maintain this information. This is only the process of login, especially when your application is in production. You cannot have the information in that case in your console. Of course, it is not in your local IDE. It is now on the server. That means it is on the production. That time, every good and bad if you want to maintain, that is where the concept of logging comes into picture, which you can implement using one of the important tool, which is Log4J. And by chance, if there are any error, if there are any mistakes, in order to rectify the bug in the application, developers can go through this log files, loggers file, and there they can get the information what has gone wrong. Based on the information present inside this logger files, they can make the changes in the application. They can fix the bugs here. So basically, let me add some key points here. The key points about the logging, what we can do here. As you can see, I have added the key point here, getting the information or the messages from the application, especially when it is in the production. Information such as success, warnings, failures, everything is fine or not. All this information through which you can monitor your application. And if there is some problem, as a developer, you can go through the log files you have. And using those information, you can find the bugs also. Usually in our development time, you are going to use console if you want to know anything about your application, every good and bad. If there is any exception, information will be printed on your console. If something you have, whatever logic you have developed, if it is fine or not, you are going to use the statement system.out.println, and on your console you can check. But however, in the real time, your application will be deployed on the server. That means it is on the production environment. That time, if you want to have the information about your application, even if it is working fine, if it is not working fine, that is where loggers comes into picture. Now, in order to implement the concept of logging, basically you can also monitor the application here. In order to implement the concept of logging, there are many tools available in the market. One of the most important tool, which is very popular, happens to be Log4J, which is right now Log4J 2. It is from the Apache. I would like to go with Log4J 2.x. Like this, we have other concept also. We have something called as Java logging. You can go with that also. We have something called as Commons login. That is also one of the option. You can have it alongside this common logins. And like this, many other options are available in the market currently. But one of the most important tool which is being used currently is Log4J in order to get the information or the messages of your application. How we can get it, where and all we can store, is it console is the only way, or what other options we have? All of this we will see in the upcoming videos of this series. Now let's go through more fundamentals before we actually implement Log4j for logging. Suppose whatever logging we have here, the log messages which you have got it from your application. What exactly is happening in your application? Is there any error, exception, if everything is okay? Is there any warning? All this information about your application you are collecting, and that is only called as loggers or logging. Fine. Where we can keep these messages, where we can keep the log messages, that is what we need to see here. Fine. So if you have a log messages which will contain what exactly happening in your application, you can keep it inside the console. Of course, in the core Java also, what exactly happening in your application, everything you could able to see on your console. And if you want, if everything is good, if you want to check whether it is happening or not, you used to use one statement, system.out.println. There, using which on your console you can get to know what exactly is happening. Fine. Now you can also keep these log messages inside something called as file. And file is something very often used in the industry. We have something called as .log file, which is a text file basically, which contains all the information about your application, messages, success, warning, failure, whatever it is. Exactly in the practical we will explore, you will have more idea on this. So basically, to keep the log messages, loggers, what is happening about in your application, all this information we can also keep it inside the file, that we call it as log file, which is used very often. I would like to give a star here. Likewise, we can also keep this information or the loggers inside the database also. We can connect and we can keep this in the database. That means I'm referring to the table. And also you can, if you want, you can send via mail by implementing SMTP. That means everything which is happening in your application, the status, to monitor your application, you can also connect to the mail and you'll be getting the mails, what and all is happening, whether if there is any problem, success, failure, warning, everything, all the loggers details, you can also get it on the mail. Like this, many ways are there. File happens to be one of the most commonly used approach to keep these log messages. Fine. Now practically you'll see, you'll have more idea on this. And also, before we proceed further, there are three important components here. Number one happens to be logger, number two happens to be appender, number three happens to be layout. Let me just write down here. And these three important components, you must know about it. Logger means it is a base object actually, whichever classes you want to be part of your logging. All those classes you may have to create one logger object. So out of all in your application, of course, multiple layers will be there. You will have a controller, you will have a service layer wherein you will be writing the business logic. You will have a repository wherein you will be writing the persistence logic, a logic which is responsible to interact with the DB related activity, to store the data, to retrieve the data. So multiple layers will be there, right? So basically, out of all, multiple classes will also be there. Which are the classes you want to be part of the logging? All those classes you may have to create the logger object. So in your application, many classes will be there. Which classes you want to participate in the logging process? All those classes you have to create logger object, which is a base object. That means you're activating the monitoring, that these classes must monitor. If there is something good here, I should be getting the update. If there is something bad here, if there is any warning, everything what is happening in those classes, I want to monitor. If you want to monitor, if you want to activate the logging in that, all those classes you have to create the logger object, which we will see practically also. Appender, that means where you want to store. We have something called as file appender. We have something called as JDBC appender, console appender, exactly where you want. So it is about where to store. Let me just write down here, where to store, whether these logging messages, you want to keep it in the console or a file or a database via mail, for which we have something called as appender. Layout is talking about the format. Format in the sense how you want to print, how you want to store, how to print or store, keep the log messages. Let me just write that here. That means you want it to be in the XML format or HTML format, or you want to follow a specific format. Specific means you can also decide your own pattern, how your log messages to be displayed. You can see first I want date. For an example, I would like to go with 01st 03 2024 for an example, okay? And maybe you want some extra information, which class it is. That means the class name. That means what and all information, how you want to display that information. That pattern also you can specify, your own pattern. You can see in your SpringBoot application, whenever you run on your console, you'll be getting some messages. Those are log messages, and that will be in a specific format. First, you'll be getting the date, time, then class, then you'll be getting the priority methods, which is one info. More on this I'm going to talk. All you can also specify your own pattern. So layout is talking about how you want to keep those log messages by following a specific pattern or XML pattern or HTML format. What pattern or what format you want, how to display, how to print, how to keep is talking about by the layout. And appender means where exactly you want to store, whether you want to store it on the database, you want to send via the mail, or you want to keep it in the files or on the console. All that will be taken care by appender. Logger means we just have to create one logger object in all the classes which you want to participate in the logging process. If you have 100 classes and if you want to participate, if you want all the 100 classes you want to monitor, then all the 100 classes you have to create the logger object. Of course, you can achieve globally also by using the concept of aspect oriented programming. I don't want to get into that complexity now. I want to keep it very simple. So all the objects, all the classes which you want to part of the logging process, then you have to create the logger object inside those classes. And usually if you have any pojos, a simple class without any business logic, maybe that class has just variable, setters, getter, pojo, maybe entity class or value object, simple class with no much business logic, which is not so important. In those classes will not be creating the logger objects because there is no need of monitoring those classes. Usually such a class controller class which will have important logics, or service layer which will have the business logic. All those classes, important classes, we are going to create the logger object. That means we are activating that these classes we want to monitor. About these classes we want the information, we want to activate the logging process. So these three important components also important going forward. Whatever the discussions are, I'll be using these terms and you should be in a position to relate with whatever I have just discussed in this video. Now it's time to implement Log4j and have a better understanding. We have seen this theoretically. It's time to connect the dots by implementing. For which, very first example, I would be creating a simple Java project. Of course, it will be a Maven project. Let me just open the Eclipse IDE. In the Eclipse IDE, you know very well, by this time, you know how to create a Maven project irrespective of the IDE you're going to use. In Eclipse, I'll go here, File, New, Maven project. I would like to create a simple project here, simple, next, and I would like to give here as com.telusko and the name of the project. Maybe I'll give it as Log4J2 and simple example. I would like to give it as Log4J example. Fine. So this is our project and I want to give the name also same, artifact ID, name, both of them are referring to same, and I would like to say finish here. You can see the project is getting ready. And as you can see here, our project is ready. And by default, whenever you create a Maven project, it will be Java 1.5. That is a default version which Maven will pick it. Now I want to work with the higher versions, maybe 8, 11, 14, 17. It depends on you. For which you may have to add some properties within the pom.xml to change the Java version. For which I'll be opening the Google browser. And within the browser, I would like to just take you through Maven compiler plugin, Java 14, whichever version you want. You can just search in the browser. You'll be getting many options. Here we have Apache Maven, right? Click that. If you click, you'll have some properties. These properties you may have to add into your project. That is what we may have to do here. Let me open the Eclipse IDE and I would like to add this. I want to work, maybe it is telling 1.8. You can give other versions also, maybe Java 14, maybe Java 17. No problem. Since it is a very simple project, I would like to go with whatever version I have got here. You can mention any version of your own choice. Now I would like to just right click here and there is an option here, Maven. I'll say here, update the project to see the changes. I would like to click OK. And you can see now it is Java 1.8. You can specify the version of your own choice. There is no problem. Now I would like to go and create one simple Java project here within the source main/Java. Right click. I'll create one simple class and maybe the class name, whatever you want, you can give. I'll say here Log4J test. This is the name of the class. Very simple example, very first example, com.telusko whatever, maybe I'll say here main. Any example, any package you want, you can give, not a problem. And I would like to just create a project here. I'll say here finish. Done. What we need to write here, we will see to it. Now I want to implement Log4j. I have told you three important components comes into picture whenever you are working with logging with Log4j. Number one happens to be logger object. Number two happens to be the appender. Number three happens to be the layout. Now in your project, how much ever classes you want to be part of the logging. That means whichever class you want to observe, in all those classes you may have to create object of logger. Now logger is not a part of Java, it is not a part of JDK, it is a third party, it is from the Apache. You may have to add that dependencies also into your project. So first we will see the entire project setup, then we will go into implementing the Log4j. So let me just open the browser again one more time, and you can see here you can just search Log4j API to Maven. Very first option you can get it here from the Maven repository. Click on that. And you can see here we have two things, Apache Log4j core, Apache Log4j API. I would like to click this and you'll be getting so many options. Of course, 3 is alpha beta version. Don't touch that. Any option of your own choice with respect to the two. Maybe I would like to just go with this. All right. Let me just click this. Ignore about this. Okay. So many dependencies, some issues. Now at the stage of learning, that should not create any problem. Okay, I would like to take these dependencies from here and open my project, and I would like to go to the pom.xml and I would like to add the dependencies. Of course, if you want to add the dependencies, it has to be within the dependencies tag. So within the dependencies tag, one dependency I would like to add it. So let me add this dependency, Control Shift F for the proper indentation. So this has been added. We may have to add one more dependency here. Let me just browse to the Google and I would like to just go back here. Like the way we have added Apache Log4j API, we may have to add this also. Let me just click this. And again, it has to be the same. I think I have selected 2.1.7, any two version. And I would like to go with the same here. And same, I would like to just take it from here. I would like to go back to my application and add this dependency as well. Right? So Control Shift F. Right. Now it has been added. Both of them are Log4j API, Log4j core. Both of them are, have been added and they are same versions. Let me just update my pom.xml. Right click. We have an option Maven and update the project. Done. The moment I have updated the project, it has been added. Now I can use the logging concept. I can create the object of loggers and we can implement the Log4j. This is the setup. Once the setup is ready, now it's time to implement the project. Now we have the basic project structure ready. It's time to implement Log4j, for which I have created one class. Based on the project need, you may have different number of classes. For now, to start with, very simple project is one class we have here. As I've told earlier, whichever class you want to observe, you want it to be part of the logging. In that class, you may have to create the logger object. I want to observe this class, so I would like to create the object of logger. I'll say private. That means this object should be accessible within this class itself, static. This can be accessed by both static and non-static methods. Then I would like to go with maybe final. I don't want anyone to change this. I will say here logger type logger equals to log manager dot, I'll say here get logger. Fine. So I would like to specify the class name which I want to be part of my logging process. So I would like to add this class name here, dot class. Fine. Now let me just end. And here I would like to write some maybe business process, maybe one dummy method I would like to write here. Public, I'll say here static, one basic, maybe I'll say here void process. One basic, method just to give you this, and I may have to import this. Let me just import also. You may have multiple options to import the logger. Please go with org.apache.logging.log4j logger, right? So I would like to finish. Yeah. And here you can write all the service layer, business layer, maybe connecting to database, whatever is the logic you can write here. Just to start with, I'm just keeping it empty. Any logic if you want, you can just write it. Here we have different log levels, right? We have something called as trace. We have, a debug. Then we have info. We have warn. Then we have the error and fatal. All these log levels you can specify. And right now I'm going to specify that within, same method, but in the real time, in the actual projects, based on the need, where exactly what is happening, there you can specify this. Now to start with, in the very first project, I would like to specify all of them together. I would like to go with trace first. So I'll say here dot trace, right? So I'll say here trace, and we have method. I would like to just give some message here, maybe one string type of message. I would like to go with maybe some basic message here. Maybe I'll say here from the trace method, right? So trace method, these are the priority methods. Trace method, log levels, or to implement these log levels, we have some methods. We call it as priority methods, and you have to write these methods in a distributed way based on the code need. If you are tracing, that time you may have to write, right? Maybe if you are calling to some other API, that time you can trace. Wherever you're debugging, that time you can just write debug method. Wherever there is a chance of exception, that time you can write the error method. Right now, all these methods, I would like to keep it now itself in the one place. Let me just write down here. As you can see, I have written all the priority methods. Again, I would like to repeat, these methods usually will be writing in different places based on where what exactly happening to specify the particular type in the loggings. Right now, in the very first basic application, I would like to just add them in one place. Fine. So now this is done. Next two components comes into picture now, which happens to be appender and layout, where you want these loggings to be and in what format, in what pattern, that I have to specify. For which, within source/main/resources, you can just create one XML file. Within that file, you may have to configure about appenders and about the layers, and those appenders you may have to also link with this logger inside this configuration file only. You can just create here new, you can go to others and you can just directly create the XML file, or you can just create the normal file. Doesn't matter if you don't have an option of XML file, you can just go here, create a normal file and just give the dot extension. Fine. I would like to go with maybe log4j2.xml. If not, you may have the option in your IDEs also to create directly XML file. Whatever name, I would like to go with log4j2.xml. Done. So within this, I have created one XML file. So we will have one root tag here for the XML. If you are creating the direct XML file, let me just do that also. I would like to right click here, delete, and directly also I would like to explore, do we have any option? So right click here, new, and I would like to go with maybe there is a file here, and I would like to go this time with the XML option itself, XML, and we have an XML option here, XML file. Next, and the name, I would like to give this here. I'll say here log4j.xml. Fine. So what's a log4j1, 2, you can specify. So we have got this root. Now we may have to configure, for which we just have to create something called as configuration. One tag, configuration. Okay. So I'll say here configuration. Let me just write down here. You can see I have written the configuration. If you want, you can also add one status. Even if you don't add, that's fine. I'll say here status. Maybe I'll say here equal to info. This is optional if you want to know what this is all about. If you don't want to add this attribute also, that's totally fine. Let me just give it as status is attribute. All right, done. Now within this, two things comes into picture. Number one happens to be the appender. Let me just write that here. I'll say here appenders. Appenders means where you want it to be. Okay, appenders. And then we also have something called as loggers. Loggers, anyway, we have specified here. This loggers tag is to link with the appender. Fine. For that purpose, we have this. So we may have to also have this, and we also must have something called as appenders. Within the appenders, we may have to specify what type of appender you want, where you want this loggings to be. You want it to be on the console, you want it to be on the file, you want it to send via mail, or you want it to be in the database. So we have multiple appenders. We can go with the console appender. I would like to go with here console, and similar to that, we also have something called as JDBC appender, right? We also have something called as file appender. Like this, many appenders are there. I would like to start the journey with maybe file appender and the console appender. Later, if you want, you can explore the other appenders also, where you want this loggings to be, on your console or on your file. So within this file, I would like to specify in what format, what is the layout that we may have to specify. Within the file, what to do, we will see later. Let me just first go with the console only. Within the appender, let me just write this in a proper format. That's fine. Now here is where I have to specify in which format I want it to be, for which we may have to again use some tags, pattern and pattern layout. And also all these are the classes. Let me just open here, Control Shift, I'll say here T, and I would like to go with this console. All right, so let me just open here, and if not, I would like to just take this, I would like to highlight this, and now I would like to go with this. Okay, you have an option here, console. Let me just open this. If you want, you can open and check. And if I have to open, you can see all these are the classes. And there you can see we just have added the annotations. Fine. So now let me just, okay, this is one of them. And let me just go with some other. I would like to go with maybe, I'll say a pattern layout. How you want it to be. The layout you may have to specify, right? So let me just go with this. I would like to say, and let me just open this. All right. That class by mistake I have opened. Now let me just open this. You can see all of them are classes, not just pattern layout. Other whatever tags you have used, those are classes, and you can see plugin name they have given, and this is the tag name. Whatever tag name I have used in my configuration file. Not just that, other you can see within the pattern layout, I can specify the pattern also. I can specify the pattern. All right. Let me just go with the pattern. How you want it to be. What is the pattern you want to follow? These loggings, how you want to see, that you may have to specify. Okay, I have got into the proper indentation. So here I have to specify the pattern layout. That means how you want. Within that, I would like to specify all these loggings, all these loggers, how you want to keep within the console. That you may have to specify here. Now let me specify the pattern, how I want it to be displayed. So I would like to go with maybe %D referring to the date. And then I would like to go whatever you want in between. Maybe I want hyphen in between. I would like to go now which class. So that I would like to say here %C. You need not remember, all these patterns are available in the official documents also. Fine. Now after which maybe I want to have a method name within this. So let me specify what is the method name. Okay. So I'd say here %M, capital M. It's a method name. Again, I would like to specify the pattern, for which I would like to say here, what is the pattern? I mean, what is the priority method you are using, right? Priority method in the sense whether it is a warn or info, that also I want to print, for which I have to see here %P, right? And after which I would like to also go with the method or the message which you want to pray, for which I would like to go with %M. And after printing this, let me just give here, after printing this, I want the next step to be maybe go to the next line, for which I would like to go with maybe N. You need not remember all this code. By default, when you are going through the official documents, what each of them indicates, you will get the details. It is referring to date and time. First, I want date and time. Then I want the class information, method information. Then what is the priority method, whether it is a warn, info, trace, that inside this whatever messages we have. And then maybe after this, I wanted to go to the next line. I'm just telling here %N. Fine. And also for the consoles, you can give the name here. I would like to go with the name. Name, maybe I'll say here logging to, maybe I'll say here console. And then I would like to specify the target here. Let me specify the target. And I would like to write here target equals to, maybe I'll say here system.out. Internally through system.out.println, I want it to be there on your console. That I have specified. Let me just save this. So we should have the option of target also. And it is asking me to write this. Okay, within this, I have to specify within double quotes. Let me just write that within double quotes. Yeah, done. The error is resolved. Fine. Later, we may have to link this on the logger. How do we link? We will see. Let me just save this part. I would like to go back here, save this, and definitely the actual code. I may have to call this, for which I have not written the main method. Let me just write down the main method here. Okay, done. And within the main method, I would like to just invoke this particular method. One very basic application this is. I would like to save this. And now I would like to run this application. Right click, run as the Java application. And you can see on your console by default, you're getting only from the error method, from the fatal method. Why? Because you have not actually configured the appenders, right? So I've just had some appenders here. Everything I have not configured. So what I'll do here is I'll go back here. I will say, I want all the classes. I mean, whichever class you have created the logger object to be part of the scanning process, for which I would like to, you can just specify the package name, whichever classes you want it to be part of the logging, that you can specify. And now if you just go with one tag called as root, we have one tag called as root. If you go with this, all the classes within which the logger object has been created. That will be scanned, that will be part of your loggings. Fine. And here I would like to just to say here something called as appender reference. REF. Now within this we have one tag. Of course, let me just close this. And I would like to see one attribute. REF equal to whatever name you have specified. This name you can give any name. I have given this name logging to console. If you want, you can give any other name also. That name you may have to just specify here. Now, of course, you may have to also add the double quote. Let me just add this. Done. Let me just again save this. Linking is also done. And I would like to just rerun this application. Right click, run as the Java application. And you can see on your console, you're getting it, right? So you're getting by default from the error and fatal. Others you're not getting. By default, it is giving you these two levels only, for which you can do one thing. Also within this, you can specify the level, right? I can specify the level here. Maybe I'll say here within this root, what is the level? You can specify the level. Level equals to, maybe I would like to go with info. Let me write down here info. I would like to just save this. And again, I would like to rerun this application. Right click, run as the Java application. And you can see, oh, again, let me just open this. And we are just getting this from the error and fatal. Other levels, we are not able to get it. Let me just cross check. As you can see, again, you're getting the same. These things are default. Everything, whatever I wanted, that is not getting printed. So the name of this file, it is not automatically, recognizing. So for which you may have to just change it to Log4J2 only. By default, it has to be recognized internally. Nowhere I have specified, right, that there is an XML file wherein I am giving the information about the appenders and layout. Did I inform that anywhere in my application? Nowhere. So if you just give the name Log4J2, maybe let me just give back again. I would like to just make some changes. Let me just again, all right, let me just delete this file. Okay, this has to nowhere link with this, and I have to just rename this. Let me just rename this to Log4J. Done. I would like to save this now. And now I would like to just rerun my application. And you can see we are getting from the info, whatever level you have specified here, right? So I would like to go with the first, maybe I would like to go with trace. Whatever level you specified here, from that level, all the below levels also will be printed. All the below levels also will be part of your loggings. So let me just give here as trace. And I would like to just, of course, I have to just save this. And then I would like to go back to my application, and this I have to run it, right? XML file I need not to run. You can see from the trace, we are getting trace, debug, info, warn, fatal, error. And of course, it is not because of how, it is not because of, how you have written here. Even if you write here up and down, doesn't matter. Actually, the log levels, we have a log levels, right? The first level of the log is trace, then debug, then info, then warn, then error, and then fatal. Even if you specify here up and down, maybe you are writing here debug first and then trace, that will not be a matter of concern. Based on the levels, log levels or priority methods, that will be printed. So if you just give the level as info, whatever you're writing, that will be printed. Below info, whatever you have, that all will be printed. If you go with only warn, then warn and below warn, whatever levels you have, log levels, all of that will be printed. So let me just go here and specify. This time I would like to go with maybe warn, right? I would like to go with warn, and I would like to save this and run my Java application once again. You can see you'll not be getting from the trace. You will be getting from the warn, error, and fatal. And this pattern I have decided. However, I have written in that style, it will, it is printing. You can see it is a specific pattern. You can print in XML, pattern, HTML pattern, or you want it to specify whatever pattern you want. Maybe you want date at the end. I have given here date first, and then hyphen I have only given. Then I have told class, exactly the class name, full class name you are getting. And then I've told the method name, process within the square bracket. So only square bracket here also. Hyphen as it is. Within the brackets, I've told here the actual priority method names. The log levels name I'm specifying. That also have been printed here. And then actual messages. After printing the actual messages, I want it to go to the next line. So only after every log a message, it is going to the next line. Now it is about the console. It need not to be console also. It could be some other place also. Maybe I want not just in console, I want it to be on the file also. I would like to go with file appender, right? So we have something called as file. Let me just give the name here. Name equals to, I would like to say here logging. I would like to say here logging to whatever name you want, you can give file, right? So I have told here logging to file. Now after which I would like to specify the pattern. Let it be same for this also. Let it be same. And what is the file location, that also you may have to specify here by adding one more attribute. That means I'm telling I want this to be not just logged in the console, you can also log on the file. You can specify multiple appenders at a time, and in each appender you can follow different pattern also. Your call. You can have one appender, you can have two appenders, you can have three appenders at a time, or you want only file appender. You don't want it to be printed on the console. You can go with only file. And here also multiple different types of files are available. We will try to see that. Now you can see whatever pattern you have specified, it could be same, it could be different also. Right now to start with, I'm just going with the same pattern. Now I have to specify where exactly is that file. Let me just give the attribute here, file name. Let me just give here file name equals to, I would like to go with maybe within the logs folder, and I would like to go with maybe my logging .log is the file name I have specified. Fine. You can give your own path, whichever path you want it to be, that path also you can specify. And maybe the pattern, whatever pattern you want, you can choose that also. Maybe I want date at the end right now. You can just decide that also, right? You don't want anything else from here? No problem. You can go ahead with that. Whatever pattern you want, you can follow how you want it to be kept. Now, right now, I'm observing my application, and all the loggings I'm storing on the console also. I'm also keeping on the file, and the file name, the specified path also I have given here. And of course, again, I would like to repeat, all these loggers, these levels I have written in one place. Usually in your application, you'll have multiple methods. Inside the multiple methods, lot of logic, lot of lines will be there. And wherever there is a warning, then you can just write this. Wherever you want to give the information about what is the current step, maybe you can just write this. Okay, you can specify. Just to start with the very first application, I'm keeping all of them in one place. Let me just save this. I would like to also save this. And now I would like to just run this application. Again, I would like to run this application. And of course, here we have, let me just refresh the entire project. I would like to just refresh this. And you can see we have got log folders. Logs folders, earlier it was not there. Within this, we have something called as mylogging.log. If you just open this, and of course, if you just, it might not be visible here. Right click. I would like to go to the specific location. Let me just go to the location where exactly it is. Okay, it is in this particular folder. And if you just click here, okay, and here, let me just show you this folder. Again, it is also showing 0 KB here also. Oops. It is because of one more silly mistake. What is that? I'm not linking here. The linking is not yet done, right? So how I have linked here, console logging to console, I may have to also link this logger to, what is the name I have given? Log to file. Then this problem will be resolved. I would like to just go here and write it, logging to file, whatever name you have given. I would like to just save this again. And maybe I want it from the info, right? So I would like to go with info, or maybe from the debug. I want it from the debug. Debug, and all the below log levels also will be part of your loggings. Let me just save this. And now I would like to again run my application. If I have to just run my application, you can see here on the console also we are getting from the debug level. And also if you just open, I would like to just refresh my project once again. Let me just refresh this, and I would like to open here. Let me open. See, on your file also you are getting all the loggings. Making sense? Something similar you might have seen in your Spring Boot application. That means Spring Boot developers, not we, the one who have developed the Spring Boot framework. They have used the concept of loggings extensively, right? So I hope now with this basic project, you got the idea. Whatever you have seen, theoretically, now you are in a position to at least connect the dots to start with. We will explore more. Now let's understand logging with Spring Boot application. To understand this video, you should be familiar with Spring Boot and API development. You can see on your screen, I have developed one Spring Boot application, and here we have an API. Upon making a request to this endpoint API 1, you will be getting the wish good morning, good afternoon, good evening based on the current time of the system. Now for which I have used the service layer also, wherein actual business logic has been written. You can see, let me just walk you through this entire project. we have a service layer. Within the service layer, I have an interface, code to interface. And here is where I have written actually the business logic. Fine. It will give you the, based on the current time of your system, it will give you the wishes. Good morning, or it will generate the wishes. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. One basic API development is what I have done here. Fine. So now let me just execute this program. And before I execute, I would like to show you one thing. Let me open pom.xml. And you can see I have added one dependency, of course, web dependency, because I had to create this API for which I have, added this dependency. Apart from this, I have not added any extra dependency in pom.xml regards to log4j or logging. You will not be finding here. Fine. Now I would like to run this application. Right click, run as the Spring Boot application. So let me just run this application. And upon running this application, I hope you are able to notice something similar which we have seen in earlier application. All these loggers you are able to see on your screen. That means Spring Boot team, the one who developed this Spring Boot, they have used logging concept extensively, because of which you could able to see on your console. And which appender they have used the console appender, because of which on your console you could able to see some of the log messages. Also you can see here we are getting the logging level info only you are able to see here. And I would like to add one point here. By default, info, warn, error, 3 log levels are enabled in the Spring Boot application. Though whoever has developed this Spring Boot, the entire framework, right, they have used all the log levels extensively, but they have just enabled info. If they enable all the log levels, then you'll see so many loggers on your screen the moment you're running the application. And as a fresher who are new to the world of Spring Boot, if they see so many log messages, they may get confused. They have just enabled the info and you could able to see here. And also they are following a specific pattern. First, date and time. Then we have the priority method, right? And then we have the main method or the class names. And also you must be aware, in order to, build this Spring Boot project behind the scene, you as a developer are not dealing with many of the classes. Behind the scene, to support the development, to support the rapid application development, so many beans have been loaded in the application. So many classes will be created to make the auto configuration, to make the process of developing the application easy. Fine. So all these classes, they have implemented the loggers concept, and some of the classes you could able to see on your screen. So let me just hit the endpoint here and see if I'm able to run this application. Let me open the browser here, and if I open the browser, this is my endpoint, and if I hit the endpoint, I'm getting the result good afternoon based on the current time of my system. So my API is working fine. There is no problem in this. And one thing I had to show you this is the logging concept. By default, Spring Boot team is also, they have also implemented this. Apart from that, you can see in the Maven dependencies, Log4j concept, Log4j, SL4j, you'll be able to see by default. You have not added this. The moment you create a Spring Boot application, Log4j and SL4j will be added to your application by default. These dependencies are there, are part of Spring core library. It is a part of the Spring framework. You need not to add explicitly like the way we have done in the other application. We have developed one Java application without Spring Boot. There we had to add those manually. But when it comes to the Spring Boot application, these things are by default. You need not to add any extra dependency for the same. SL4j, it is like the specification. Log4j is one of the implementation of the SL4j specification. It's like for JPA is the specification. Hibernate is one of the implementation for the JPA. Similar to that, SL4j is the specification, Log4j is the implementation, because of which you could able to see here. So let me write my own loggers here. Let me just do the logging, and whichever class you want to log, in that class you have to create logger object. That is the first step. Let me just do that here. I'll say here private static final, and I would like to create a logger object. Logger type maybe log equals to, I will say here log manager dot, of course, get, and within the get I would like to just find out the log get logger. All right, here I have to specify whichever class you want to be part of the logging. That class I would like to add here. Dot class. Let me just add this here. Dot class. Same process what we have seen in our Java application. Fine. So let me just import this. You could able to see you have an option to import. I would like to go with import of the, okay, let me just do that. So import is done here. Fine. Now I would like to comment this, and I want to go with SL4J here. SL4J means the specification, of course, the parent of the Log4J, for which I have a same option here. One more time, I would like to write this one more time. And if you're writing this one more time, you need not to write this log manager. Instead of log manager, what I would do here is I'll say here logger factory. We have one more class, logger factory dot. Again, I would like to go with get logger, and here I would like to specify this. Anyway, we have seen log manager with the log4j. This time I want to implement directly from the SL4j, the specification itself. Both it will work fine. There is no problem in that. Let me just add this dot class. If you just add this here, this will be loaded from the SL4j. Let me just also import this, and I want to import from SL4j itself. So I have an option, multiple options to import. Let me import from org.sl4j. This time directly from the specification. And you can see here, log factory is also from the SL4j, logger is also from the SL4j. We have seen with log4j also, there is no difference. Even if you want, you can go with that. And this time I want to just demonstrate with SL4j. It's same as log4j, that there's a specification, log4j is the implementation. It's something similar. Now I would like to just try to log here, and I would like to go with maybe log is the name I have given, right? Dot, maybe I'll say here info, and I would like to add some message here. I will say here, okay, request is in, or maybe I'll say here control in, maybe I'll say here API 1. Some message, whatever message you want, you can give here, okay? And again, I would like to give one more information here. One more information I would like to give, and I would like to add one message here. Maybe the message is service method, okay? Service business logic or service method logic is being invoked, and we got a response. You can give any suitable message. I'm just giving some random message. I would like to just save this. After saving, I would like to just again redeploy this entire application, and I want to show my own logs also. Fine. So let me just redeploy this entire application, run as SpringBoot application, and I would be hitting the endpoint here. Let me go to the browser, or you can use the Postman also, not a problem. Again, I would like to hit this. We are getting good afternoon. We are getting the result. You can use Postman tool, or you can use the browser because it is binded to get request. My API is binded to get request. I hope you all are aware of this. Now, again, you can see if I have to go to the console, you can see here control in API 1 service logic is being invoked, and we got the response. So we are getting this. This is something which I have done it. Making sense? I have done it, right? So now I would like to also show you one more thing. In place of info, I would like to go with debug. See here, I would like to go with debug. And now again, I would like to just redeploy this entire application. Right click, point of observation here. Okay. Right click, and as a Java application, as a Spring Boot application, let me just go back to my browser and hit this endpoint. We are getting the result. I'll come back to my application, and you can notice here, we are getting control in API, but whatever logging message I have given within debug, we are not able to see on your console. At the beginning, I have told you, by default, the log levels which are enabled in the Spring Boot application is info, warning, and error. Right now, I'm doing with respect to debug. It is not enabled. In that case, you have to enable separately. If you have added any of the logging message in the trace or the debug priority method, or the log level trace and debug, in that case, you have to enable this explicitly. Apart from this, whatever logging I have implemented, nowhere I have added no XML file like the way we have done in the last application. And I would like to open the application.properties. Nothing is present here. I have not added anything. So by default, whatever logging you have implemented using the log levels, info, warn, error, that will be part of your logging by default because Spring Boot has enabled that. But if you have used something debug or trace, then you have to enable that explicitly. Making sense? Now let me just do that here. I would like to go here, logging. We just have to add some property. Okay, let me just add that here. Logging dot level, and where you want to implement that package name you have to give. For an example, I have used the debug here, right? And debug is present inside this class. And this class is present inside this package. I have to give the package. I want to enable log level debug inside this class. Whatever log messages are there with the priority method debug right? And I want to have, implementation of that, for which I have to just specify here logging.level.com.telusko.rest and equals to, I would like to go with debug. So let me just go here, debug. Let me just save this here. After saving, again, I would like to redeploy the application. Let me just stop this, redeploy the entire application, right click, run as the Spring Boot application. And now I would like to go back to my browser or the Postman. And now I would like to hit this endpoint. And I'm getting the result. And let me just show you in my application. If I open, you can see we are getting the message which is there within the debug log priority method also. Making sense? So debug, whatever logging I have implemented using the debug priority method. First of all, was it showing in our appender by default, in our console appender? No, it was not showing. Why? Because it is automatically, by default, it is disabled. So it is info, warn and error. These three log levels are enabled in the Spring application by default without your efforts. You need not to do anything for this. However, if you have implemented the log levels trace, if you have implemented the log levels debug, in that case, you have to explicitly enable it. Making sense? And now maybe I would like to go with the trace also. Example, for an instance, let me just add one trace also here. I'll say here log dot, and let me just go back here. Maybe I would like to do that within the service method. Okay. So if you want to do, of course, you have to first create this, whichever class you want to part of the logging. Inside that class, you may have to have the logger object, and I would like to have that logger object here, and implementation is done. Now I would like to just add the trace method. Maybe I'll say here log dot trace. Okay. Here I would like to add, maybe I'll say here service, or I can say here business logic is being invoked. Okay. Whatever message, logging message you want, you can give. I would like to just save this here. Fine. Now it is trace. Trace by default, it is enabled in the Spring Boot application. No, you have to explicitly enable that. So let me just stop this application, go back to my application.properties. Either you can follow the XML approach like the way we have done in the last application. Since it is a Spring Boot application, you can go with the application.properties. I hope those who are watching this, they know about application.properties, configurations and Spring Boot in general. Only then you can understand whatever I'm talking here. Now I want to enable this. Where exactly you want to enable, you can specify the package name and what is the log level. I would like to go with the level here. Maybe it is trace. And of course, it is not com.telusko.rest. It is com.telusko.service. Let me just add that here. And I would like to save this. And again, I would like to redeploy this entire application. Let me just run this application. All right. And now I would like to just go to my browser or the Postman tool to request this API to reach this endpoint. So I have got the desired result here. Let me go back in my application and I would like to check here the console. And you can see here, we are getting service logic is being invoked and we got the response. That is fine. We have got control in API. That is also fine. So whatever trace level we had given, I'm not able to get that here. Let me just add, or instead of this, I would like to just go back and say something called as root only. Let me just comment this. I would like to just comment this. Let me add the comment. And now I'll say logging dot level dot, there is something called as root equals to, I will say here trace. Now what happens here is whatever logging they have implemented using the trace priority method, the Spring Boot developers also behind the scenes, so many classes will be loaded into your application to support the rapid application development, to support the auto configuration. Spring Boot team has created those inbuilt classes. They have implemented the logging concept extensively. They have used trace also, they have used debug also. However, they have not just enabled trace and debug. On your console, you are able to see only info, warn or error because they have just enabled only these things. But they have implemented trace also. They have implemented the debug also. The moment I say logging.level.root equal to trace, that means right now the logging level trace will be enabled for the whole application. Whatever implementation you have done using trace as a developer, that also will be visible on your console. Whatever Spring Boot team has developed, right, that also will be, whatever they have implemented the log level trace, that also will be visible right now. So let me just stop this and I would like to just implement this. Right click and I would like to go here and execute this Spring Boot application. You can notice here. And you can see so many trace also you're getting. See here, so much is there, right? And you can notice here trace debug info. See, because of this only they have disabled this. They have told, okay, as a user of the Spring Boot, the one who's using the Spring Boot to develop the application, let them not confuse them. So they have given the log level in from info onwards, not from the trace. If it is from the trace, if they have enabled from the trace by default, then if you are getting so many messages for the first time, if you're running the application, for you as a developer, don't you think it is so much complexity? You don't want to know all those things, for which they have avoided, and they have told, let's not give from the trace. They have given from the info. So info, warn, and the error is by default enabled. If you want some other log levels, then you have to go with the trace only. Fine. So now let me just go back to my application. I would like to just hit this endpoint and see if I'm getting the results or I'm getting any errors here. No problem. My application is working fine. And I would like to go back here. All right. So now I would like to just show if I'm getting the trace, whatever we had implemented. We have to find now because so much is there here. Debug is there. Trace is there. Where is our trace? We have to just find it. And let me just try to find that and show you whatever trace we have implemented, whether we are getting that or not. Now you can see whatever I had implemented, right, using the trace, you're able to see that also now. Fine. Is it making sense? Now it is not recommended to enable from the trace, especially on your console. I would like to now go with maybe from the debug itself, or maybe let me just comment this and I would like to stop this application because so many logs we are getting. And these logs I have not implemented, of course. Spring Boot team has implemented inside classes. But where are those classes? Is it here? Yes, it is here. Behind the scenes, so many classes are loaded into the container to support you, to support rapid application development. And inside those classes, Spring Boot team have implemented logging concept. They have added all the log levels, trace also, debug also. But earlier you were not able to see on your screen. Why? Because the default logging which they have enabled is info, warn, and error. Only those logs you could able to see on your console. But debug and the, a trace you could not able to see. Now I have enabled. I want to see that also. So only you are getting all these things also. Fine. So now let me just get back here. I would like to just see from the debug. So let me just comment this also. I would like to just comment this and let me just comment. This is done. Now, anything else if you want, you can specify here itself. And maybe I want it to be on the file apart from the console. I want to create one file and I want to follow my own pattern also. You can see Spring Boot by default, they're following its own pattern. Date, then the priority method name, then the class name, then actual message. They are following their own format. If you want, you can specify the own pattern like the way we have done in the XML file in the previous application. Same thing if you want to do here in your application.properties, you can specify. Let me just write down here. As you can see, I have implemented the pattern logging.pattern.console. For the console, first I would like to go with the class name, then the priority method name, then the actual message, then the date, and I want to go to the next line. Whatever you want, you can implement. I would like to just save this. After saving this, I would like to right click and run as the Spring Boot application. Let me just run this Spring Boot application. And this time you can see you are not getting from the date. You are getting from the class. See, from the class, then the method name, then the message. Only that part you are getting here. Because that is what you have told. You have given your own pattern. If you don't give your own pattern, then Spring Boot, they have implemented their own pattern. Because of it, you are getting the messages in their own style. First, you used to get date and time, then the priority method name, then the message and all of this. Now I have given, I want in this pattern. Fine. If you want on the file also, that also you can specify here. I would like to go with logging.filename. I will say here file.name equals to, let me add that within the logger folder. I would like to go with log.text. Within the same, one logger folder will be created. And there also, I want my log messages. Fine. And again, for that also, I would like to give the pattern. Let me just give the pattern for that. Whatever we have done in the XML, right? Same thing I'm just doing with the application.properties because all the configuration usually in the Spring Boot application, we do within the application.properties file. So now I would like to go with pattern.file. Of course, it is not the console, it is the file. And here class again, the pattern name, maybe I want to go with the method name also. Let me just add that also here. Fine, right? So maybe let me just add in between whatever you want, you can add it. And let's go with the date. Why not? Let's go with the date on your file so that there is some difference here. I would like to just save this and I would like to just redeploy this application. Now here one file will be created within the folder logger, and there also all your loggings will be there. All the messages of your application will be there from the debug level. If you have done something in the trace, that will not be recorded because you have enabled from the debug only, right? So let me just redeploy the application, run as the Spring Boot application, and I would like to just go to the browser, and you can see here, I would like to just hit this endpoint, and I'm getting the result. That means application is working fine. And you can see all the log messages. Are you getting in the style earlier we used to get? No, because this time I have given my own pattern. I know wanted the default Spring Boot developers, whatever they have given the pattern, because of which first we used to get the date, time, which we have seen at the beginning of the application. I'm not getting that. I'm getting in my own pattern. It's a console appender. We can have more than one appender also is what I have told. And there must be one file also which has to be created. Let me just refresh the application. If I refresh this, and you can notice we have to get one more folder by the name logger. Let me just check that here. I would like to just refresh this once again. Till we could not able to, get that because some silly mistake I have done here. Instead of file, I have given filer, the wrong property name. Let me just save this once again, and let me just redeploy this application. I would like to keep it as it is. These mistakes you might also encounter. So now we are getting this in our own pattern. Let me just make a request to this endpoint. And if I'm just reaching this endpoint, of course, I should be generating one file also. I should be getting one file also this time. So let me just refresh this time and check if we are really getting it. All right, refresh this. And let me just cross check again. You can see we have got the folder logger, whatever we have specified here within this logger. What is the pattern I have given here? First should be date, and then the class name, then the priority method name, then the message, then the actual method, and it has to go to the next line. I would like to go here and open this log.txt, and you can see here, first we are getting the date. Making sense? And then we are getting the class name, then the priority method name, the log level, then the actual message you are getting. Fine. Then the method name will be whatever you specify based on your own pattern. Making sense? So whatever we had seen with respect to the Java application about logging, same thing we have seen now with respect to the Spring Boot application. Now I hope you got fundamental idea about logging and how we have to implement.